A Podcask of Amontillado is a horror podcast, and so we may cover subjects that are not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another episode of A Podcask of Amontillado, where we delve into the dark, dreadful, and terrifying parts of the world of Vino Atrocitus. And welcome to another episode of A Podcask of Amontillado. I don't know why I say that. The introduction says that, so I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I say it. I am your host, Gary Mitchell, and as always, I am joined by my most amazing co-host,
Erin McGurn, it's good to be here today. And thank you to our wonderful guest, who I'm going to let introduce himself in a minute, for coming on.
Yes, my name is Shaun Rosado. I am infamous because of our subject for tonight's. I have many stories. This goes like in the top 3 as far as when people get to know me and I start talking about things that scarred me from my childhood. This is one of those stories. And so when Gary said, "Hey, we're going to talk about this," I said, "Are you sure? Because you know me, I will suck up all the air in the room just talking about this particular subject. So, just let me know." But yeah, I'm a huge geek, and my wife and I actually travel around the country, at least during the before times, and we would go to different conventions and sell all of our artwork as a company called PopCycled Baubles. These days, we're a little bit more laid back on that, but we will be going to Dragon Con. So depending on when this comes out, hopefully you'll be able to come and see us. And if not, then plan to see us at Dragon Con 2023. So, but thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I've basically been beating down like Gary's door since he said he was going to start doing a podcast about horror. I was like, heck yeah. So this was not a hard sell for me at all.
Absolutely. And when I thought of you to be our guest, the first topic that came to mind is exactly because of the story you told. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut to the chase. We're discussing zombies today. Specifically, we're talking about George Romero zombies. And in super specific, we are talking about the 1968 classic Night of the Living Dead. We will also touch on the 1990 remake. We may touch a little bit on some of the other remakes. But the Romero zombies is something that we could do many episodes on, and we probably will, right, Erin?
Oh, without a doubt.
Because we can do an episode on each one of the movies, so, look for more. So, 1968, bunch of people decide, hey, let's make a monster movie, and end up inventing a whole new genre of horror.
It's true.
Because zombies before this were pretty much the Haitian, the voodoo, people walking around being used as slaves on plantations and things. And Romero based this on the story of ghouls, which were ones that eat the living. And no one had really seen that before. And this movie is a shock to the horror system.
Oh, without a doubt.
Absolutely. I mean, when you talk about Night of the Living Dead, there is essentially, this movie defines an entire type of monster, and that is not an easy thing to do. When you talk about defining monsters, the last time you had an era where monsters were defined were the Universal movies. You're talking about Frankenstein's monster. You're talking about Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon. Those were the monsters, Jekyll and Hyde, things like that. And then comes along the zombie. And like you said, the zombie was a Haitian voodoo mind whammy that people had thrown on them. The idea of the reanimated dead that cannibalistically attacked the living for no reason other than a singular drive that made them want to eat the flesh of anything it could find, not necessarily just humans, but any moving creature, was a startling revelation. So when this movie comes out, it changes the landscape of how you look at horror, especially when it comes to regards of the zombie. And we talk about The Walking Dead and how Robert Kirkman made zombies popular, but the zombie never went away. you know,
No.
and that's a big deal, and that's also because of the copyright issue that happened because of the title
Yes.
change. But the zombie changed the landscape of horror, specifically because of just what Romero did in that movie.
Well, and you brought up Universal, and I think that's a great point between the differences is
Mhm.
that the Universal monsters gave us, yes, creatures or monsters or villains, however you want to call them,
Mhm.
that we could either be scared of or some part of us could relate to.
Mhm.
There's no redeeming factor for zombies
None.
where there could be arguable redeeming factors for everything we've gotten before that. And
Hmm.
so now we're just introduced to these monsters who have base instincts. There's no reasoning with them, there's no negotiating with them. It is
Mhm.
either kill or be killed.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the horror from the original zombies was the, oh my god, dead people are walking around and they might touch me.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And that was pretty much the horror, which was very creepy. If you go back and watch, like I Walked with a Zombie or White Zombie, there is some very
Mhm.
Mhm.
serious creep factor there. But when you throw in they're a ravening, mindless horde that are just unstoppable, unrelenting, and like you said, Aaron, it's either kill them or they will kill and eat you. Is terrifying. And then the simple fact of the great line that is from the sequel, everyone they kill gets up and kills.
Yep.
Yep.
Their army continually grows while ours shrinks, which is even more horrifying.
And that
It really is.
your wife, your husband, your mother, your father
Hmm.
Mhm.
are no longer those people anymore.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because 9 times out of 10, the zombies get in and make everything worse when it's that one
Mhm.
person that someone knows and they can't bring themselves to put
Yep.
them down.
It's true. And one thing that we're dancing around a little bit is when Romero made this movie, he introduced a new type of monster that we had known about prior, that we had seen in decades worth of film, but had never been defined in this
Mhm.
way. And I'm not talking about the zombie, I'm talking about mankind.
Mhm.
The
Hmm.
worst enemy in a zombie movie is always going to be the people who are the other. And it's something that goes back to tribalism that we have fought against our entire, existence as a species. We fight against this idea of us versus them
Hmm.
because instinctively we feel like if I don't protect mine, whatever that is, then they are going to take mine from me.
Mhm.
And we see it today just as much as we saw it in the 60s when this movie was made, all the way back to the when we were cavemen. And it tapped into something very primal because you have in that movie people who legitimately want to survive. They want to
Hmm.
Yeah.
keep their family and their friends safe, but they can't get along with one another. And
Mm-mm.
because of that, they sabotage one another to the point where the zombies, who are ostensibly, you can fend them off if you plan and you have a team of people who are willing to work together. But if you have friction, that friction will kill you every
Yep.
time.
Yeah, I mean, that's all right. So let's kind of back up a little bit.
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
And so, for anyone who's been living under a rock and doesn't know, Night of the Living Dead is the story. It starts out with a lady and her brother going to visit their parents' grave in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And then there's a creepy guy in the graveyard who turns out to be a zombie. The girl makes the run. She gets to a house, meets up with other people, and the main conflict of the story is this group of strangers trying to survive the night with the zombies coming after them.
Right.
And I believe, as you kind of nailed it there, Shaun, the biggest monster and the biggest problem in the movie is not the zombies. It comes down to Ben and
Cooper.
Kruber arguing over what to do. Should we go
Mhm.
upstairs? Should we go in the basement? Should we run for it? Should we stay here?
Mhm.
And as much as I love Ben, I have to say the man was wrong.
Well, I think the problem with Ben especially, and the beautiful part about this is that the way Romero wrote the script, and again, for those of you who have lived under a rock, the thing that we're not talking about, which you have to talk about when you're referring to this movie,
Mm-hmm.
is that Ben is black and Cooper is white. Ben is
Yes.
a regular, everyday, working Joe black man, and Cooper looks like he's upper middle class, white working dad, has a bit of a drinking problem, abusive towards his spouse, not necessarily what you would call an upright citizen, but at the same time, probably fairly emblematic of what a guy would be from that region, from that time. And here
You're
comes
you're
Ben.
you're paint by numbers 68 straight white male.
Right,
Yep.
exactly. And so then you have Ben, who is just trying to survive, and he's like, I'm not going to just sit here and let you tell me what to do because you happen to be white. And the irony of this is that, and Romero insists, he swears up and down, and everybody agrees with him, that when they were casting this movie, they only casted the best actors for the role. This was
Yeah.
not something
Mhm.
that
It was
happened.
not scripted for him to be black.
Yeah,
Right.
it wasn't a
So
active political
Yeah.
choice.
right, it became political, which is why
Mhm.
I think the movie stuck in people's minds so much. And let's give full credit to Dwayne Jones being just a consummate, amazing actor who, I mean, okay, first off, look, if you've not seen the original 1968, Dwayne Jones is just a good looking dude. Okay, so
Mhm.
he's easy on the eyes. Out of all the characters outside of Barbara, like, I mean, as far as the men are concerned, he is the most attractive. So you gravitate towards attractive people as leaders in general, right? He just happens
Right.
to be black. Then you have the fact that Dwayne Jones is just acting circles around most of these people. And he has a
Mhm.
very strong, very self-possessed, I'm going to survive this attitude. And then you have Cooper, and Cooper looks weaselly. Cooper's out of shape. Cooper smacks his wife around. He's clearly drinking too much. It's
Mhm.
not a good look. And so when they
But
butt
he's not
heads,
all bad though. I mean, he
he's
does
not.
legit care for his daughter. You can
He
tell that a
does.
lot of this is coming from his panic over what's happening.
And that's very true. And in fact, I was just rewatching the 1990 movie right before I got on board here, just to kind of, refamiliarize myself, because I watch these movies like 2 or 3 times a year anyways, just because this is like one of my go-to movies. And it's true. I mean, Cooper legitimately cares for his child. Him and his wife, they may not, be on the same page, but when it comes to the daughter, they want her to survive.
Mhm.
And the fact that she's bitten is really, really putting a strain on him. So we're seeing Cooper at his worst. And that's the other thing, is that this kind of scenario is when people are going to let their worst traits out.
Exactly. And we mentioned it for a minute, and I think that's one of the things with The Walking Dead and
Mhm,
why humanity, like we living, breathing, not zombified people,
mhm.
are the real issue in zombie films, is because it's that choice during a post-apocalyptic state of, do we give into the ego and the selfishness and all of those other things, or do we keep with keeping for the greater good?
Right.
Mhm.
And that's the constant struggle.
It really is. And if you look at, I mean, so this is where I do a lot of philosophy talk when I get into stuff like this. And Gary's heard me go off for like an hour about this kind of stuff. When you talk about humanity as a whole, modern humans have really only been able to not just rip each other to shreds ad nauseum, no matter what, for maybe a couple 100 years. And
Mhm.
that's giving us an extremely flexible term of not shredding each other. I mean, I'm being extremely generous here, okay?
Oh, yeah.
We have just really started to learn that cooperation yields better results than domination. And even now, we're still fighting that demon. So if
Mhm.
the world falls apart, if these comforts that allow us to see past that disappear and all we're left with is survival, it really pushes us to
Yep.
going back to this base animal state. And that is a hard thing to overcome. And that's why I think it resonates so much with us, because I think we all realize that unless we truly muster up enough courage to say, no, there's more strength in working together than there is saving myself, we fall apart.
Yep.
And that's kind of the thing I like to point out to people, is the fact that in general, the people who find a way to work together are the ones who are normally taken out first because they're the easy prey. If you like watch Walking Dead, right? And every single time you have a character who knows what the score is, who knows how to get out of the situation, who knows how to rebuild society, they always get obliterated. They never survive because it's the selfish people who see that as a weapon. They can come in and they could just rip you to shreds because you can become an easy enemy to then rally people around with fear. And
I was
fear
gonna
is
say you're a threat.
you're a threat, and fear is a massive motivator. I was actually just on a podcast a couple days ago talking about the fact that fear and pain is one of humanity's most potent learning tools. It's the reason why we tend to go to that. Why do we listen to people who instill fear into us versus hope? It's because fear, when we're young, you put your hand over a stove for a half second, you learn never to put your hand over that stove again, right? But if somebody says, if you give somebody a piece of candy, they will then, give you something back later on. It's not an immediate lesson. That kind of generosity, that kind of working together, that kind of sharing mentality, it doesn't process as quick as pain. So that's why these people are so dangerous and so powerful in these zombie apocalypse settings, is that fear it rips you up.
And it is a solid motivator. I mean, we talked about this a little bit in the Eldritch horror, one of Lovecraft's best quotes. One of the oldest emotions of mankind is fear. That's not the exact quote. Don't send your hate mail to at a podcast of Amontillado at gmail.com. But but he's right. It's very easy to slip into fear. It's easy to goad fear. It's harder to inspire, I think. But it's really easy to go, that guy over there is going to take your thing if we don't gather together and put him down.
Right. And that, I want to bring that back around to your original statement, Gary, which is Cooper is right and Ben is wrong. He's not. Ben is right because Ben is trying to give everybody options. Ben is trying to not use fear to ram you into one spot and leave you there. Now, ultimately, was Cooper correct in that situation? Yes. In that situation, the basement was the best place to go. But he was trying to scare people into doing it. He was trying to use fear to do it. So
you're absolutely right. Yes.
So Ben was correct in the idea of, we don't use fear to do this. We try to keep our options open until we have no choice but to go down to the cellar. Whereas Cooper was like, screw all that. Let's just go straight down. Now, that said, Ben had a real piss poor, especially in the 1968 version. He had a piss poor way of trying to win people over. This guy basically comes in, he basically just slams his hand down and says, we're going to start boarding up windows. And they're making so much noise. If they would have turned off the lights
I know.
like just put some stuff up against the doors and stuff and just, gone upstairs or gone into the basement, none of the zombies would have found them. They kind of caused their own death.
And they even at one point kind of realized that, because they talk about the fact that in ones, and this is one of the other things that's horrifying about zombies as a monster, is 1 zombie, 2 zombie, 3 zombies is not a problem.
Right.
It's when you start getting 10 zombies, 15 zombies, which
horde.
is what happens at the end. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the hordes of zombies absolutely are going to be the things that you have to be afraid of, because it's not so much that a one shambling slow zombie can get you. It's that when you are fighting 40 of them, there's only so many directions that you can split your attention before your back is open. And unless you do stuff like train for this, keep your backs to each other, you know how to protect each other's flanks, you have gone through this kind of training, you're going to have blind spots, and that's how you're going to get overrun every time.
Yeah, and you can board up the house as much as you want. When you have 30 zombies pounding on that boarded up window, they're getting in.
Yeah.
They're going to get in, yeah. And let's be fair, there were more than 30. Even in the 68 one, I'd put at least a couple hundred. By the end of that movie, there's a couple hundred. Yeah, I mean, because they were right by a freaking graveyard. And I mean, all the dead people, they must have had a berry palooza the day before, because there were so many fresh bodies just walking in. I was like, oh my God.
Well, and that's one of the things that I'll give the original credit on is like the makeup effects are amazing.
Yeah, for 68 especially.
Every zombie looks different. And you
absolutely.
have some of them that do look like they were buried the day before. But there are ones who have stuff hanging from their faces and I completely understand for 68 having this come out and having people horrified.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of touch on that then, because let's hit that impact, because we were mentioning the Universal monsters before, and I was talking about this over at convention this weekend. You look back at like when the original 1930s Dracula, Frankenstein came out. Those movies were scaring people to the point where people were passing out and running and would flee the theater. I mean, look, Frankenstein has a legit warning. Guy comes out at the beginning going, "Hey, you're going to see some creepy stuff here." And then so you look back at movies up through the 60s, they were not that intense. Even the scary movies, which could be very creepy, could be very effective, they were not as hard hitting as then. You give somebody who'd watched 1932 Dracula and then you sit the 1968 Night of the Living Dead in front of them.
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's fine. It's fine. And then here are people chewing on the remains of that poor redneck couple. And I can't imagine what that must have been like, that level of shifting from Dracula's coming at you behind a cape to you're being chewed on as a main course.
Right. So
Graphically.
there's actually something really funny that you touched on there. And I want to talk about timing. Okay. The timing of what you talked about is also exactly lined up with what is something known as the Hays Code. Now, for those who do not know your 20th century cinema, the Hays Code was what came before the Motion Picture Association of America. Basically, during the early 20th century, people were just doing crazy stuff. I mean, they were doing wild stuff, and parents didn't know what kids could see, what they couldn't see, and kids would just want to go and see movies, and so it all of a sudden became, this is ruining the youth of America, and there was going to be congressional oversight on movies. So before that could happen, the Hays Code came out and said, we're not going to do anything anymore. We're not going to break any of these rules. We're going to stay away from that. And the irony is that the Universal monsters are one of the main reasons why the Hays Code was put into place. To the point where when they would re-release Dracula, just a few years later, all the way until the 90s, there are certain sounds and certain scenes that are trimmed or just cut out until they remembered, oh, that's right, we don't have to follow the Hays Code anymore. These are basically like PG films. Like, okay, if you've watched the original, like Dracula, right? When Bela Lugosi kills Renfield and he throws him down the stairs, there's like a scream.
Oh, yeah.
After the Hays Code, and they did a re-release, cut the scream out. No scream. There is no scream after that.
It was the Universal monsters and the Castle films.
Yeah,
and it was
the Castle films.
The Castle films, which we'll do an entire episode on, but it was also because of what he would do in the theaters.
Oh yes, absolutely. All the little shock and the
where
Castle
he would
movies,
have paid people in the theaters to scream and faint and react. Yeah.
Oh, they're amazing. Yeah, Castle movies are kind of like Lloyd Kaufman's trauma like movies, except like you had to be in the theater and there was always a gimmick. And that's what made them great. And I really wish I was alive during that time, or that people would do that today. Like, that would be so amazing to see that all over again.
Pre-pandemic, every now and then, certain movie theaters would do a whole William Castle Day. Like there's the Plaza here in Atlanta,
right?
That would do we're doing a showing and we'll actually have the skeleton fly across the audience.
Okay, so they would do the Haunting at Hill House. They would actually have the skeleton and whatnot. Oh, that would be amazing. The whole thing. I love that.
But they're the ones too that do the Rocky Horror Picture Show, so they know what they're doing when it comes to actually presenting stuff.
I love that. That sounds amazing. But what's funny is that the Hays Code stayed in place.
There we go.
Until 1968, the same year that Night of the Living Dead came out. So imagine you've had 30 years of protection from the Hays Code. Nothing that would make your grandmother sweat has been on film. And then you're going to the drive-in, right? You're going to whatever, and you hear something called Night of the Living Dead. Okay, that sounds a little spooky. What could it be? Vincent Price and a skeleton coming out of some clear acid, right? Let's give a nod to a classic. And here comes, it's shot like it's a TV report. The music is basically generic. Everything feels, down and gritty. It all feels almost, what's that term that they used to use? Gonzo. It's almost like you're in the moment, and it's
with that
practically
cinema
found footage.
veritas.
That cinema veritas, that found footage almost type of feel, and it absolutely traumatized people.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's amazing. I mean, it really is amazing to think
Mm-hmm.
that I mean, just imagine 1967, you go and you watch, I don't know, a re-release of The Blob or something. It's in color, it's tacky, whatever. You're like, oh, this is fun. And then here comes Night of the Living Dead. Oh, I saw The Blob. That's not going to do nothing. And you just crap your pants. I mean, like, nobody was prepared. Like, there's just no warning for what that could have been like. I mean, the only thing I can imagine it to is like when The Exorcist came out like a decade later, right? You know,
Yeah.
I mean, like, just
Right.
And that actually touches on what I was going to bring up about Night of the Living Dead, and that he, like, there was no hold for him in this movie,
right.
and who got hurt and who attacks,
Mhm.
and having the little girl turn
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
and then start attacking. I can't even imagine what it must have been like for them, like you said, in the drive-in, to be sitting there watching this, and like to actually have one of the monsters, the creatures, the things we're supposed to root against and kill, turn out to be this little girl that we have been dealing with the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
That was always one of the big sticking points. The moral guardians got bent out. I mean, there were a lot of reasons the moral guardians got bent out of shape about this movie, but the cannibalism, oh my God, how can you depict that? But the matricide, the patricide, and then the murder or the putting down of the little girl zombie. I mean, those were always, I remember hearing people railing about those the most, of how could you have this little girl kill her parents? And it's like, that's what happened.
Oh, I mean, you're not even. I mean, think about it. I mean,
I'm
again,
underselling it.
yeah, I mean, you really are. I mean, again,
Yeah.
Hays Code, you do not hurt children in movies. For 30 years. Kids did not get hurt. Not only was a child hurt, a child became the monster.
Yep.
Mhm.
I mean, what's the closest analog that you have there in the 60s? Wednesday Addams, Eddie Munster. They're cute.
Yeah.
They're adorable. Like, and this girl takes a freaking a cement spade, one of those little cement trowels, and just butchers her mom in the basement. I mean, it's like, what the hell? Like, it is a graphic moment. And from what I hear, and again, this is just me, going and reading things about, people's experiences. That noise that the mother makes when Helen is murdered, that high-pitched squeal.
Yeah.
Apparently, nobody had ever heard a scream like that before. And by today's standards, it's cheesy. But apparently, it hit just a certain frequency or a megahertz, and it made people nauseous. The sound is what made them feel nauseous.
Yeah,
that's an impressive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and they take out of Hitchcock's playbook, if you see that trowel go up and down and you see the blood, but you never actually see the stab. And my other favorite little bit of the Foley work on the stabs is they hit a bag of rice with a stick.
Right. Yes. And that, again, the amount of creativity that went into these movies in order to make them popped, in order to make them sing, is so clever. Again, you mentioned, Psycho previous to this would probably be the biggest scare before that. And that's all about building atmosphere.
The Birds.
Ooh, The Birds is a good
Because
one
that
too.
was 63.
I could
And
see
you
that.
talk, like, going back to the kids, like, that's probably the only other movie in relation to having horror related stuff with kids, is that whole scene where the school kids get attacked by the birds.
Right. And again, in both of those movies, so much of that is implied, so much of that is atmosphere and build up. Whereas Romero did something
in your face.
Yeah, like I mean,
which is one of the
again,
reasons this hit so hard, is people weren't used to it. It was always, you cut away, you didn't actually see the horror. Here it's she's shoving food in her mouth.
Well, I mean, it's not. I mean, let's take a step back even further from that. You only have 5 minutes of downtime at the beginning of the 19. Well, out of any adaptation really of Night of the Living Dead, there's really about 5 minutes of downtime. It's basically they're coming to get you, Barbara. You put whatever the wreath is on the parents' grave, because in the original it's the dad, on the 1990s it's the mom.
It's the mom.
but whichever version doesn't matter. But and then basically, okay, we're in monster mode, and
Yep.
there's no character growth other than what the characters bring to the conflict. You don't get to know about Barbara being, a spinster or whatever. I mean, like they imply things, but there's really no background. You are learning about them
No.
in the moment. That is not how Hitchcock did his movies.
Oh no.
Hitchcock built and he grew
Mhm.
and he took the time to really bring up the kettle. So when it popped, you jumped. And that was the mastery of Hitchcock. And Romero said that works really well, but I don't have a studio to back me up. I got to
Yep.
get to the gore. And it worked. I mean, that was the prototype that then became, what the standard was going forth. I mean, slashers took a page from that.
Oh
You start
yeah.
you start your movie, kill somebody right off the bat. You can then slow down, but you got to start with some gore.
Yep.
I mean, Romero pretty much not only invented the zombie, but invented the start getting people freaked out right at the top of the gate and then just go. I don't know. Talking about this man, it always feels like he never gets the credit due him, even though
Yeah.
everybody says Romero is king. And it's funny because I'm like, I don't think we give him enough credit. Like, because we don't have
Romero
him
really-
carved into the side of a mountain, until that happens, I think we're still underselling Romero.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he really did not get credit or recognition, I think, until like, if it was at least the late 90s, if not the 2000s, before people really started giving him
Oh yeah.
proper. And part of that is the fact that we kind of touched on this earlier. One of the reasons I think the movie endured and didn't just get lost in the slush pile of history is kind of a double whammy. The fact that they changed the title, and when they changed the title, they forgot to put the copyright.
Right.
So the movie immediately went into public domain, and then the video boom, the VHS boom, because it was a copyright-free movie. Anybody who's like, hey, I need to make a quick buck, people buy horror movies. I remember going to the video store in the 80s and seeing like 7 different versions of Night of the Living Dead available on VHS, like even at grocery stores. So the movie was always there. And
Absolutely. And the thing that when you look at how people see this film, go watch horror movies from the 70s, from the 80s, from the 90s, and kids are watching horror movies that are on, say, at Halloween. Guess what they're watching 9 times out of 10?
Yep.
They're watching Night of the Living Dead. Every once in a while, like John Carpenter in actual Halloween, they're watching It from Another World, but that's because he's a huge fan of It from Another or not It from Another World, a Thing from Another World. Yeah, but that's a whole nother podcast.
Which we will do.
Awesome. But for the ease of anything, you could just drop in Night of the Living Dead, and first it's a staple. Everybody can recognize it, and boom, you have exactly what you need in order to go ahead and create the environment that you want to. You have spooky atmosphere, you've got flesh-eating people, and you're ready to roll.
And you don't have to pay any extra for it.
And you don't have to pay a single penny.
And
that
it is actually in Halloween too. That's what I was double checking that, but
Yeah,
I was
'cause I
like,
know
I
it's not
knew it
Halloween,
was in
yeah.
one of the Halloween movies, but it's in
Yeah.
the second Halloween one when they're in the hotel room.
Right, yeah, because I knew it wasn't in the first one, because I was like, I know for a fact what the kids are watching was Thing, because that was basically him telling Universal, I want to make a Thing remake. He was like, gimme, and it worked for him.
Yeah.
Thank God.
Yeah, but I remember people would a lot of this movie went from being, oh my God, this is shocking, everybody talking about it, to then everybody dismissing it as worthless schlock and whatever, and paying no attention to it and kind of downplaying it. Because I remember like being a horror fan of the 80s and 90s having to say, I like zombie movies. Well, there are like 4 of them.
Not really, but that's what people always assumed. Yeah.
There was Night of the Living Dead, and then the 90s, the zombie boom erupts. And I think that's when he started to get some of his propers, as the kids say. The kids still say that, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. But it was, because he did Night, then he did Dawn, then he did Martin. He did a bunch of movies. But like I said, I don't think it was And I remember when Dawn made a huge impact, and everybody talked to me for a while. And then when Day, I remember a lot of people, at least in the community I was in at the time, were like, Romero again? And it didn't seem to hit very well. It took a while for people to recognize Day for what it is, as good as it is.
And it really did. And you have to remember that by the time Day came out, that was 1984, I believe, 1985.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly.
I was in high school, so it was around that one.
Yeah. So I mean, we're talking the mid 80s here. Let's see real quick. Hold on. I'm gonna just go.
I've got it pulled up. Hold on.
All right. When did Day of the Dead come out? It was 1980. What?
I remember the trailer terrifying me.
Hold on. We're talking Day of the Dead?
Yeah, 1985. It was released in July of 1985. So there we go. So you're talking about the fact that you had, at this point, 16 years since he had made his first zombie movie. And the first zombie movie is about, we all can't get along and we all get destroyed. Okay, fine. Then you have Dawn of the Dead, which is basically, hey, let's do Night of the Living Dead, but let's really put a budget behind it. And Dawn of the Dead had the social commentary of, we're also commenting on the fact that we are all kind of zombies when it comes to things like, we want to buy certain things, we want to consume certain things. And there was a very nice subtext built into it, which is why I think so many people love Dawn of the Dead. Personally, I think out of the three Dead movies, that is my least favorite one. Now, I know that's blasphemy for some people, but this is like saying this is my least favorite piece of favorite pizza too, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
It's still my favorite pizza, so it's like, this is still an amazing slice of pizza. It just happens to be my least favorite. My most favorite is actually Day of the Dead. And the reason why I like that one so much is that half of the thing that he is talking about there is, if society falls apart, how can you trust the people who have the guns to actually work with you versus try to take over? I mean, and that's a problem that we're still dealing with today, is how do you stop the military? How do you stop people with a militaristic mindset from just taking over and saying, I could just put a bullet in it? I mean, Dr. Frankenstein in that movie talks about, by the way, Frankenstein is literally a nickname for I forget the guy's actual name. But in Day of the Dead, there's a scientist, and he was like, oh yeah, we don't have enough bullets in the world to kill all the zombies. He's like, literally, there are not enough bullets. And he was like, the time for that was a long time ago, and you just missed out. And I think that's what really bums people out about that particular flick, is that it is nihilism personified, and they don't realize that two things. One, nihilism, even the creation of nihilism, if you ever read Nietzsche, is supposed to be a transitory state. And you're supposed to go through it and realize that this is not a place where you can stay. If you stay in nihilistic mode, there is literally no reason to exist. And the whole point of Nietzscheism is to become the best version of yourself possible, not to cease to exist. So it's kind of funny. So nihilism is a point where you realize, okay, now I got to work out of it. The end of Day of the Dead is, we tried everything. The whole point of that movie is, we tried everything to keep it going. It didn't work. We got to start over. But people forget the end of that message. It's like when people are raving about The Handmaid's Tale and how it's a picture of us today and how it's this horrible, terrible thing. And I'm like, have you ever read the book? Like, oh yeah, I've read the book. And I'm like, did you really? And they say, yeah. I'm like, so you like the ending? Like, I hated the ending. I was like, you didn't read the epilogue. Because the whole point of that book is, in the epilogue, it is basically told that all the events that happened prior in that book, in that story, is the actual founding blocks of basically society revolting against that civilization and becoming a better union, making people all equal. And everybody now is treated as individual equals versus, an elite versus an oppressed class. But people don't read that part. People don't read that part of the Dawn movie or the Day movie. They don't read the hope. They only read the despair. And again, that's because, as I say, we tend to kind of go back to the things that hurt, because pain tends to teach us pretty easily. So when we start to think about these movies, we tend to think of all the stuff that scares us and shocks us and just really, like rattles us to our core. And we don't realize that there is hope in these movies. I mean, hell, the original Night of the Living Dead, nobody made it out. That one is legitimately depressing. Like, but even then, like, the movie does end with the fact that, like, it looks like humanity's putting up a fight and, they're going to make it through. Dawn, you get some people to escape and they're able to fly off into the sunrise. And in Day, they actually find an island and they start life over. Now, there's only 3 of them, but one assumes that it
You got to
grows.
start
Well, and
somewhere.
even in Dawn, she's pregnant,
Yeah.
and so there's your rebirth. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, there
It's
are
there.
lit moments in this,
Mhm.
and I think that's part of all zombie culture, though, is that
Mhm.
like, yeah, we're facing this horrible thing. Life still fucking goes on.
Exactly.
Well, that's one of the things people kind of forget. One of the part of the words of this is for post-apocalypse is post.
Right.
This is, you know, the world as we knew it ended, but now we're building a new one, and it
Yep.
should be an examination of what are we building and what precepts are we going to use.
Right.
But I want to loop back around though to the movie though.
Right. Sorry. I'm
But,
sorry.
yeah,
You got
well,
me
I
on a
mean,
philosophy kick. My bad.
well, no, but and it's there's a reason we're still talking about this movie from 1968, and this is why.
It's true.
But I want to loop back to around the first time each of us saw it. Shaun, you're going last
Oh, okay.
because no one can follow you.
Nobody can follow me. Right.
Yeah. So for me, it was one of those endless VHSs that we saw all the time. My mom, I've said before, she was a horror fan. We were at the supermarket and we had just gotten a VHS player. We're talking like 84, 83. And she sees it and it's only like $8. And at the time, new VHS tapes were like 30.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, oh, I remember watching this movie. And we took it home and we watched it and it scared the hell out of me and I loved it. And we had it and I could watch it whenever I wanted. But I just remember it hitting me, and especially because the gore and the tension and watching these characters all bounce off each other and being fascinated with what's causing this, what's making the dead get up, how are they going to survive. And
Absolutely.
I was pretty much a fan from the get-go. How about you, Erin? Do you remember when you first saw it?
No.
It's just always been there.
It's just always been there. Again, like growing up, that was my mom and I's thing. And so like we just watched horror movies. You will probably laugh, and especially after we hear the story about you watching it for the first time. The fact that I don't remember it, it probably didn't have much of an impact at the time.
I want to become like Christian Bale and be like, good for you. Good for you.
No, we can talk sometimes about like Killer Clowns from Outer Space, or
I love Killer Clowns from Outer Space.
One of my goals in
Attack
life.
of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh, I love that one.
Those I remember. Those fucked me up. But Night of the Living Dead, I will say I remember the ending. Because that was the first movie as a kid I ever saw where it ended badly. And like the main, like the one survivor for it died. He like finally got out. Help was there, and then the help fucking kills him.
Yeah.
And like I remember that. And I remember being surprised by that and just being like, what? That's not how that's supposed to happen. And that's literally it.
I think that's one of the reasons that stuck with me too, because again, I mean, we see that all the time in horror now where not everybody makes it, but this is one of the first ones where nobody made it.
Oh, no. It's not even the fact that nobody made it. It's that help arrived. He went out to go get like the help that arrived, and the help that arrived killed him.
Like he survived. Like the threat was over.
Exactly.
And he's like, all right, I'm good. And then pow.
Exactly. Like that's what hit. Not the fact that like nobody else survived. Like that just was.
Well,
but the fact that like help finally got there, and then it was not help for him.
Well, watching it even now and knowing it's coming when they go, I think I see one. Yeah. It's still like it comes up the back of my throat of like, oh God.
And I mean,
just that cold, there's another one for the fire, boys.
and of course, then he's thrown onto the fire right next to Cooper, you know. And I mean, again, the fact that this was not written as a racial commentary, but then Romero just leaned into it and said, I'm
Oh, yeah.
absolutely, I mean, clearly once he started filming it, he realized what he had on his hands. And he
Yeah.
was like,
Oh yeah.
roll into the curve, you know. And there's a real famous line from Wayne Gretzky, and they always asked him, how are you so good at hockey? And he was like, I don't try to go where the puck is, I try to go where the puck will be. And that's what Romero did in that moment. He realized what he had on his hands, and he didn't try to go where the puck was going. Or where the puck was. He went where the puck was going to go.
Yep.
And he was like, this is why this is going to matter. And having that shot of Cooper and Ben on the pyre together, and they're going to get burned.
Because when you're dead, it doesn't fucking matter.
It doesn't matter. We're all human. We're all the same. And if that's coming out in 1968, you're coming to the tail end of the 60s civil rights movement.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that is a massive statement to make. I mean,
yeah, there had
it
just been
huge.
2 assassinations that year.
I mean, you're talking, this is a time of strife and misery as far as unity in our country that we had not seen until this modern decade. You know, I mean, we're talking 50 years of more or less, you know, there are tensions and there are problems, but there was not remotely close to what, you know, people had seen for a long time. And prior to that, you're talking, you probably have to go back to literally the Civil War. You have to go back to, you know, Reconstruction to get that kind of animosity between folks. So this is a real crazy moment in the world. And for Romero to just literally put it right there and say, here are some good old boys, some good old country boys who are not trying to do anything wrong. And that's the irony, is that they're not shooting him because of the color of his skin. They're shooting him because they think he's a zombie.
Yep.
But in the end, a good old boy shot a black man, and they threw him onto a fire next to the rich middle American or the middle American upper class guy. And like Erin said, when you're dead, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that it cuts to that the series of stills with that highly disturbing music.
Yep.
I don't know where he found that music, but it is just legitimately unsettling.
I used to know exactly what music catalog it is, because during that decade, you could actually hear that movie and that music in quite a few different films. That was actually just stock music, and he just found the stuff that made people irritable. He basically found music that made people uncomfortable in that stock inventory. But that's his news. I mean, that's the thing that people, I think, forget, is that this is a guy who shot commercials. This is a guy who shot news film. He worked for television stations. He took their cameras during the weekends when they didn't need them, and he would just film on them. The stones on this guy, massive, you know, and he used every trick in the book to make a movie that just sticks with folks.
And speaking of sticking, Shaun, lay it out. When did you first see Night of the Living Dead?
Okay, so first off, preamble, Erin, have you heard this story before? Do you know this story? Oh my God. All right, I'm sorry in advance. This is going to take a minute.
Strap in.
Strap in. Okay, so let me paint a picture for everybody. For those who have never heard me tell a story before, I am not A to B person. I am a person who likes to take you down the primrose path a little bit. We go through a couple of cul-de-sacs. I want you to get a feeling for what's going on here. And with that, let me paint the picture. I am 9 years old. The year is approximately 1988 or so. And I am basically staying in my room for a balmy summer day. My parents, specifically my dad, had bought 2 VHS players, and he had wired our house. Now, my dad never talked about, you know, the just sheer engineering power that he had. But my dad literally figured out a way for us to have a switcher in our living room. And if we want to watch a movie in our bedroom, all we had to do is go into the living room, pop in a tape, flip a button, and it would go to my sister's room, my room, or my parents' room. And we could watch that movie in our room with perfect clarity, because my dad had
amazing.
Right? But you talking to him about it today, and he's like, oh, it was nothing. It was a couple of cables, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, dude, you are underselling what you did in like because he did this like in 1985. I was like, you literally had our entire house wired for watching movies wherever we wanted to. It was the closest thing to Netflix that we could have in the mid 80s. I mean, And my dad would record everything off of the HBO and Showtime. So what he would do is he would put in these long play tapes, and if it was something that was coming on, he would record. So we had hundreds of these long play tapes that were 9-10 hours long with multiple movies on them. And we had the kid section and we had the parent section, and then we had stuff that we could watch together and so on and so forth, all the vagaries in between. One of my favorite movies to watch as a kid, still love to watch, is Short Circuit and Short Circuit 2. So I was like, I want to watch Short Circuit and Short Circuit 2. I know they're on the same tape. Let me toss this one in. So I put in the extended play tape. I pop it and I route it to my bedroom, and I go and I start playing with my G.I. Joes. And for 3.5 hours, 9-year-old Shaun is living his best life. I am having a ball. Cobra Commander is fighting Megatron. I got the GoBots in there. I got some Ninja Turtles. I'm talking, it is like the Infinity War of the 80s, people, okay? And I am just having the best time. Johnny gets made into an American citizen. He's gold-plated. They roll credits. And then this black and white movie starts. Now, at this point, my dad had shown me black and white movies. I knew that black and white movies were a thing, but my dad loved showing me documentaries. Romero shot Night of the Living Dead as a documentary, as a newsreel footage. So as it starts and I see this, my brain goes, huh? And it says the Night of the Living Dead. And I'm like, this is weird. What's this going to be about? So I stop. And the reason why I know there's only 5 minutes of movie where you're not completely crapping your pants is because it was the only 5 minutes where my body had not locked up. The first moment that freaking white zombie basically jumps out from behind a freaking headstone, my body locks up. And in my child brain, by the way, is this PG-13 or can I go full curse?
Go full curse.
Go full curse. My brain went, holy fucking shit, monsters are real. And like I lock up, and then I see this brother's head. Now, granted, it's a rubber head. It's very clearly a rubber head. It goes blah, and he's dead. And I'm like, no. And I realized this movie came out in the 60s. And I go, Mom and Dad lied to me. The monsters are really out there. They're here. Like, they fought them off in the 60s. What the fuck? And like,
you had a full on like
I freaked out.
God.
What and I couldn't move my. So there's this. We all know about it. We're taught about it in grade school. It's called the fight or flight response, meaning that either you're going to immediately start punching or you're going to run away. Well, the flight response can also show up as you fucking can't move until the fear leaves your system. So. Night of the Living Dead is 89 minutes long. For 84 minutes, I'm basically squeezing Cobra Commander to death. And I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
You had a full-on, like, War of the Worlds moment.
I
did. That's what War of the Worlds was like for them on the radio.
So I'm watching this movie, and the entire time in the back of my head, I'm like, my fucking parents lied to me. They fucking lied to me. These things are real. There are monsters. What else did they lie to me about? And so I'm thinking about all the other things. I'm like, oh my God, that means that Dracula's out there too, and the mummy, and I'm thinking of all they weren't actors. They were really monsters, and then they killed them afterwards. And my brain is building a complex fiction in my head about how all the things that have ever been on celluloid are actually out there. And Michael Jackson's Thriller has come out at this point, and I'm like, they figured out a way to make real zombies do the cha-cha with Michael Jackson, and I am losing it. So at this point, the movie's over. It's rolling static. My parents come to get me to eat dinner, and I'm staring at static like the little girl in Poltergeist, okay? Because I can't
You're
move.
having an existential crisis.
I have seen death. I cannot now exist without this moment of I have clearly seen what death is. I saw a little girl die from a zombie bite and then eat her parents. I'm what you call fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
So I eat dinner. I'm very quiet for the rest of the night. My parents actually remember. They say that they remember, now that I've told them the story, which, by the way, the best part about this is my parents never found out about this until I was an adult. I kept this
You didn't rage at them for lying to you that none of these guys were real?
As a 9-year-old, I thought, you know what? They saw that little girl eat their parents. What if I start acting like a crazy person and they lock me out of the house? And then I'm food for the, like, they have 2 other kids, you know, and they're twins. I mean, like, if one of the twins just disappears one day, they got another one that looks just like her. So I'm like, you know, in my head, I started catastrophizing in ways that I cannot verbalize, other than don't piss off the parents. They could lock you out and the zombies could get you. So for a month afterwards, I could not sleep at night. I would wait for everybody to go to bed. I would then, we lived in a ranch style house. So, basically it's one long hallway with kind of like a big living room and kitchen area, and then rooms built off the hallway. I would patrol the hallway. I would then go to every window I could that was not in a bedroom, and I would look out, waiting to see at the end of the street light, which was very far away, the black silhouettes of the dead to start crawling up our driveway. And I just kept waiting for it. And then after I would do my check, I would sleep in the middle of the hallway with the hallway light on, and I would sleep ready for something to happen. And around 5 o'clock in the morning, my dad would start to stir, and he would always kind of wake up, and he had his own private bathroom. So I knew that he was going to wake us up about an hour later. I'd crawl into bed, and that last hour or so, I would sleep in my bed. I did this for like a month straight.
Oh.
And then I was finally able to start to go to sleep again in my own bed. And the worst part about this is, so I mentioned the street light at the very end of the drive. It's technically the side yard, but there was a street light. There also happened to be, and I don't know what moron decided to do this, an actual street light literally right behind our house. So imagine your house, and we have this little tiny 6 foot wide backyard. It's literally just like a little adjunct yard. Our real yard was on the side of the house. They put a street light back there, and guess where it's shown into? My room. So my room is casting the most spooky shadows. I got blinds casting light on me. I literally slept with a street light shining in my face, and I would just look and wait for a shadowy hand to reach up and just slow. And I was like, how am I going to get over this? So the only thing my kid brain could do was say, forget about it. Yeah. So I tried to. Now, the funny part about this is I forget about this particular traumatic moment for a little while. And then I get to be about 15, 16 years old. And I now have spending money where I can, I have a little part-time job. I can go to Suncoast Video. I can buy movies. And I'm like, cool. What am I going to buy? There's this movie, Dawn of the Dead. Huh. You know what? I'm a teenager now. This is not going to scare me. At this point, I actually have a VCR in my room. I have my own VCR. So I pop that bad boy in. I start watching it. And again, for 2.5 hours, butt puckering. I mean, like, have you ever been so nervous? People talk about swamp ass, like when you're walking outside. Have you ever been so nervous that you give yourself swamp ass from the nerves? Have you ever had that happen? Where your butt cheeks sweat so bad that you literally could feel the crack in your butt just flood with moisture? Like, and I am freaked out. And for all intents and purposes, I have another existential crisis at 15 years old. And I'm like, how in the hell am I going to exist as a human? Because at this point, I know this isn't real, but there's something so intrinsically, like, it's a phobia. Like the dead coming back to life has struck me. I have to find a way out. So my dumbass solution is watch every zombie movie they've ever made.
Yeah.
Desensitize my ass. Yep. And I made rules. And I swear to God, these rules were in place until I was 30. I had a group of people.
Oh my God.
And these group of people knew if I ever called them and said, it's go time, they knew what to do. I had a place for them to meet me. I had a plan on where we were going to go. People talk about making zombie escape plans. I'm like, dude, I had a zombie escape plan in 1995. Okay.
Yep.
Like, I was ready to go. I was 17 years old, and my friends knew if I said this is go time, I had a guy who was good with electronics. I had a guy who was good with radios. I had a guy who knew how to basically, till the earth. We had people who knew how to keep us going in the event of a zombie apocalypse, because I was not going to be one of those cats caught with their pants down. That happened and stayed through college. I would tell people about this. They thought I was joking. I'm like, I'm serious. It's never going to happen. But just in case it does, if you ever get a text from me, because we got Nokias now, if you ever get a text that says it's go time, this is where you're supposed to meet me if you want to survive. And you will never get it's go time as a text from me unless something is happening. Never had to use it. I'm glad. But
yeah,
I was in my 30s before I had truly good and well gotten over my zombie phobia, where zombies just, like, I used to have zombie nightmares. Like, and I knew I was in a bad state of mind when zombies would pop up in my dreams, because those were the things that terrified me the most.
And And that is kind of a universal. A lot of zombie fans. I mean, I know
Mhm.
a lot of people who had, like you said, Shaun, everybody had their zombie plan for a while. I think up until
Yeah.
Walking Dead. I mean, I had a go bag. I had
Mhm.
I'm at home zombie plan, I'm on the road zombie plan, and I'm at work zombie plan.
Yep.
Yep.
It's true. And Gary, do you remember? I don't know if we ever told you the story about the masterful zombie cosplayer like in 2007 who
Mhm.
walked up to me.
No.
Okay,
Oh.
you may have just met me at this point, so that you may not. So we were in the Marriott. We were at the Marriott Marquis,
Mhm.
and we had gone into to get some food, and we're checking out, and this zombie started shambling in, and Laura's like, look, a zombie. Now my wife Laura knows my zombie phobia. She knows how I react. When we first started dating, she tried to act like a zombie one time, and I said, honey, I swear to God, I will punch you in the face. And I'm like, never do this. I'm like, it's one
Mhm.
of like, just, people use the word triggered a lot. I'm
Mhm.
like, do not trigger that part of my defense mechanism. You will not like that version of me. And I'm like, I never want to threaten violence on another human. But if you come at me dressed up in full zombie gear, you better be prepared for somebody to punch you in the face. So this guy starts shambling over. And I'm like, and he's shambling at me because Laura's like really getting his attention and he's committing to the bit.
Right.
And I look at him, I was like, dude, you look great. And he keeps walking towards me. And I was like, dude, you need to fuck off. And he keeps walking towards me. And I look at him and I say, dude, you need to speak a word of English right now because the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lay you out on your fucking ass. And he was like, whoa, it's cool. And I was like, thank you. And I just and Laura is like laughing because she has to apologize to this guy. She's like, he actually is like, that's a compliment. That's how dead you look. I mean,
Mhm.
and this
Yeah.
guy, he was also like 6.5 feet tall. I rarely
Oh,
meet people taller.
jeez.
I rarely meet people taller than me. This guy was
Mhm.
taller and just no. So
Oh.
Erin, I apologize that you had to hear the crazy
No,
story
that
of.
was great.
So this is why Gary had to have me on for this particular podcast
Yes.
because I'm like, I don't know if anybody's ever had a reaction to Night of the Living Dead, and this is the '68 one. The irony is that the '90 one that came on '89, '90 is actually my favorite version of that story.
Oh, faithful connoisseurs, our conversation with Shaun was so rich that we had to continue it in our next episode. Please return to us next time, where we shall discuss the 1990 remake, other remakes, dinosaurs, and more in part 2 of Night of the Living Dead, the OG Zombie, Avino Atrocitus.
You have been listening to A Podcask of Amontillado, a production of Good to Be a Geek Media. Thank you for joining us. We hope you had a terrifyingly good time. If you did enjoy this episode, please tell your friends, then like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you would like to support our efforts to explore all the dark, dreadful, and terrifying parts of the world, please join our Patreon, where you can gain access to behind-the-scenes material, backer-exclusive episodes, vote on upcoming topics, watch the video recordings of each episode, and other bonus content. Please visit our webpage, www.goodtobeageek.com/shows/APOA, where you can find show notes, host and guest bios, links, merch, and more. If you have any questions, comments, corrections, or suggestions for the host, please find and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, or send an email to apodcastofamontillado@gmail.com. We are also part of the Good to Be a Geek Discord. Feel free to descend into the catacombs for a visit anytime. Opening and closing music is Softly Shall You Sleep by Valentine Wolf. Please look them up on your music platform of choice or at www.valentinewolf.com, and that's with an E. A Podcask of Amontillado is a trademark and copy of Good to Be a Geek Media. Logo and show art is designed by Aaron McGurn. This episode was produced by Gary Mitchell.
This broadcast is presented in partnership with Good to Be a Geek Media. Let your geek run wild. The opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Good to Be a Geek. To learn more about this broadcast and other shows in the network, visit goodtobeageek.com
or find Good to Be a Geek on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GoodToBeAGeek.